We're here to discuss the importance of optimizing nutrient availability for cellular health and overall health. Going back many years in my clinical practice, as I began to do deeper, as I began to do more comprehensive blood testing on patients that wanted to get more information, whether it was arterial health, metabolic health, or just, what is their baseline health status, there were a number of additional tests that I would check that included things like a vitamin B12 level, a red blood cell folate level, a red blood cell magnesium level, an omega-3 status, possibly a CoQ10 status. So it was just like a small sampling of various nutrients. And I was shocked at the time because my working understanding at that time was that most people would not need to use supplementation to optimize nutrient availability, that eating a healthy diet would be sufficient. Now, of course, what is a healthy diet is a whole nother topic. A lot of people's version of that is they may think of as healthy. They may actually really believe that, but it turns out oftentimes when you break it down, it's not as healthy as they think.
Dr. Gus Vickery, it has been a minute, my friend. How are you, brother?
I am quite well, Jason, and I hope you are as well. Although we haven't been able to get together and do one of these recordings, obviously we've had some good conversations in the in-between time, so we've caught up with each other. We've been keeping up with each other, but it has been more than a minute since we recorded a health podcast.
It has been, and in the meantime, since just so people know, yeah, we've been in communication. We've started a company. We've started Authentic Health Partners, which is our nutraceutical company that is based on your good work, your data. And the thing I wanted to answer the question of today, Gus, to just kind of open this up and be I don't know, we'll probably title this something very simple for the Healthy CEO show, which is, are supplements necessary, or something like that. I think there's so many people that most people, I think, understand that supplementation is necessary but then those same people will end up with a pantry full of a bunch of crap that they haven't taken in so many years. They got on some, reorder deal, and now they've got this whole stock of stuff, and then they've forgotten why they've been taking it. And so what I wanted to try to do as best as we could today, Gus, is first of all, talk about the environment, be it the food environment, physical environment with air, water, all these things that kind of cause deficiencies, and then how supplementation plays a role in filling the gaps. And like you mentioned before we got on, not just getting you to kind of a state of getting by, but of thriving and having and focusing on health span, a longer, healthier life, how supplementation can play a role in that. And then definitely in your 3 decades of clinical work with patients, understanding some of the universal deficits that you're constantly seeing, and how supplementation has played a role in getting people either back to baseline for the first time, so that once they get there, then they can start to really dial in for good health. So to the listener out there, my hope more than anything for this, and I know I've got a great business partner here and an incredibly talented physician by my side, to just help you not sort through the noise. And Gus, I would say in a perfect world, if we were all back in the Garden of Eden, just kind of strolling through on the most nutritious foods and all at our disposal, then our company probably wouldn't need to exist, right? But that's not where we are. And I want people to always know that, as opposed to two co-founders of a nutraceutical company coming on here and trying to convince you of all the reasons why you need to take our wonderful products, instead, we want to tell you about how to get the most of your nutrition and whole foods and healthy living you can. However, if you want to take it to the next level, then you probably are going to, at some point in your life, whether it's through us or something else, look for some supplementation. So, Gus, let's just start there and talk about some of the things that you see on a universal basis in your clinic whenever you're dealing with patients that come in. I keep saying deficit. What are some of these deficits? and why do we see them?
Yeah. And, I'm here, we'll ultimately discuss our formulations, but I'm actually here to discuss nutritional sufficiency, and it's important for health. That's what I'm here to discuss. Our formulations are a nice backdrop for this conversation, but we're here to discuss the importance of optimizing nutrient availability for cellular health and overall health. Going back many years in my clinical practice, as I began to do deeper as I begin to do more comprehensive blood testing on patients that wanted to get more information, whether it was arterial health, metabolic health, or just, what is their baseline health status, there were a number of additional tests that I would check that included things like a vitamin B12 level, a red blood cell folate level, a red blood cell magnesium level, an omega-3 status, possibly a CoQ10 status. So it was just like a small sampling of various nutrients. And I was shocked at the time because my working understanding at that time was that most people would not need to use supplementation, right, to optimize nutrient availability, that eating a healthy diet would be sufficient. Now, of course, what is a healthy diet is a whole nother topic. A lot of people's version of that is they may think of as healthy. They may actually really believe that, but it turns out oftentimes when you break it down, it's not as healthy as they think. But it was surprising to me then, just as I began to survey this sort of minimalistic sampling of nutrients, how often I came across insufficient or deficient B12, folate. Magnesium was real commonly deficient on an intracellular level. Omega-3s were almost always deficient unless they were already taking some type of omega-3 product or they ate a lot of seafood. So early on, I began to correct those types of deficiencies. And of course, we would have markers like homocysteine that tells us something about methylation. And then you can infer that there could be issues with riboflavin or choline. And so we'd have to begin to address that more comprehensively. And so I began early on recognizing that for the individuals in front of me to achieve a better state of health, that we were going to need to intervene and optimize these nutrients. Now, in the beginning, we talked about where can you get more B12? Where can you get more magnesium? Where can you get more omega-3s? And people would go out and attempt to increase the volume, the quantity of those foods that may have those nutrients in their diet, and yet we wouldn't see a whole lot of significant change on their blood panels. So we began to realize maybe we do need to use some targeted supplements to fill these gaps that we had identified. In my first book, The Authentic Health Book, which I'm working on a revised version of, an updated version, published in 2018, finished the content in 2017. In my nutritional chapter, I have a little section on supplementation where I say, I don't think it's necessary, right? So obviously my understanding has been evolving substantially since that time. Now, over more recent years, as you know, and as the listeners who've gone through a lot of our other podcasts know, I've got a lot more data than I had at the previous times. I've got toxicant panels, gut panels, and comprehensive intracellular nutrient panels and cell membrane and phospholipid tests. So now as I begin to review a lot more data on a lot more people, I begin to see these patterns of nutritional deficiency. Deficiency would mean it's measurably low, right? It does, you do not have the levels that decades of science have determined are what are needed for the body to maintain its function. Or insufficiency. Insufficiency is, it's not technically deficient, but it is on the low side, right? It's borderline deficient. Insufficient means not sufficient to maintain high levels of performance and to really protect the structure of your structure and function of your body as you age. And I was really surprised. I actually at first doubted the data because these are newer types of tests. So I had to go in and look at the validation of the tests themselves and the reference ranges and how did we establish those, what are population norms. And then I would go and look at population health studies for a particular nutrient, magnesium, B6, riboflavin, B12, and say, well, what has a study that's been done on a larger population revealed about the levels of this nutrient in a sample? And what I found was that it was reflective of what I was seeing in my data. Magnesium is in the upper 80s, that people are probably insufficient or deficient. B12 is far more common than we would think. And I was like, oh, wow, this is probably legitimate. Now, the other thing that validated it was that as we realized, wow, this is a lot more than just a B12 or methylation support and some omega-3s. This is fat-soluble nutrients, various minerals, essential amino acids and amino acid metabolites, phospholipids. Like there's a lot of things we need to address. As we would address that, as we put together a protocol to address it, within a few weeks, people already noticed subjectively how much better they felt. Now that I can't use that as scientific data, I can because it could be a placebo, but I could just tell you that just addressing nutrient sufficiency alone made a measurable difference in individuals' sense of emotional well-being, physical well-being, exercise performance, recovery, and many other aspects of their subjective assessment of their health. So we saw that, and then of course we would see that as we intervened, that their follow-up panels looked much better, and nutrient levels were optimized, and improved. So I then was still like, can we get this through food? Because that would be a lot easier. But I realized it's going to get really challenging because as you would begin to go through the foods, as you know, it wasn't so much about the name of the food, eggs, beef, fish, broccoli. It was actually the source of the food, right? Mm-hmm. What was the soil that this food was grown in? Was it nutrient dense, healthy, non-toxic soil, or was it nutrient depleted, artificially fertilized, and heavily toxified soil? Because that's going to directly assess what are you getting in this particular food product. If it was livestock, what is their feed? Same thing. And of course, when you begin to survey the marketplace, the majority of our food that's produced on sort of like a mass agricultural production basis is minimally nourishing and highly toxified. So I realized we're mostly consuming minimally nourishing poisons. And we're also affecting the gut, which is affecting digestive function, which is causing gut permeability issues, which is affecting nutrient absorption. The microbiome affects this. So it was a very complex interplay of issues causing the nutrient challenges. The other side of the coin is the stress levels we endure, the electromagnetic frequencies that we're exposed to, the fact that we don't sleep as much as that we used to sleep, the toxicant burden that we're exposed to every day through air, water, food, personal care products. This is creating a substantial increase in demand on our endogenous systems that manage antioxidants and toxicants, right? Or manage oxidants and toxicants. So now we're having to burn through more glutathione, more nitric oxide, more thyroredoxin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Cell membranes are getting attacked and degraded, and we need more phospholipids and essential fatty acids to replenish those cell membranes. So there's a consumption side of it where our bodies and cells are having to work a lot harder because of changes in our environment and requiring more of these nutrients than perhaps we had assessed in prior generations. So it's a long-winded way of getting to the point that in my clinical practice over years with thousands, tens of thousands of patients, thousands who I've done a precision health model with, close to 1,000 probably that have had the deeper type of workups I'm talking about. My clinical observations are that most individuals, if they're not supplementing at baseline, will have marked nutritional insufficiencies and deficiencies. They'll have substantial toxicant burden and an unhealthy gut, and that we cannot fix that through lifestyle alone unless they're going to move to, say, Costa Rica, start a regenerative farm, and have a completely different lifestyle. Also, even as I suggested ways to do this by farmers markets and food co-ops and the local beef farmer and the local chicken person, and you could start getting nutrient-dense, high-quality food, most of my patients are like, just too busy to go do all that. I just need to be able to get what I need into my body, and then I can think about the quality when it's time to really enjoy food. And so what we found was that if we went ahead and put what was the essential macro and micronutrients into their body in a pure and bioavailable manner, then they could de-stress and really just focus on making sure that the food they ate was clean and that they got adequate amounts of energy in their food and adequate amounts of protein in their food, and they didn't have to stress over did it have all the nutrient density they need. So it made people's lives much easier. So ultimately, the question, do people need to supplement? Well, it depends on your particular goals for your health. Right? My opinion at this point, based on my observation, subject to change, is that unless you're going to radically alter your lifestyle in terms of food sourcing and actually know like work with people who have assessed the quality of their soil and the quality of their livestock and the nutrient density, and then you're going to stick with those sources, and that's what you're going to do. Unless you're going to do that, if you desire to live a longer, healthier life, performing at the higher levels of your capacity, then supplementation will be necessary.
And one of the things that I think is important to talk about here is the fact that you mentioned it. There is such a consumption of these of what's in our bodies right now, like the glutathione and all these other things, just through the normal course of life. And so, if you're someone that wants to train and exercise to take it even a step further, it's common. I always need an analogy or something to kind of help me understand things better. And to me, Gus, it's no wonder so many people, when they come home, they don't want to exercise, they don't want to train, they're already exhausted because the things that would give them the energy levels and the things that they need to actually do a little extra to stay fit, to enhance their lean body mass, their cardiovascular fitness, it's already been working just to get them through the normal everyday environment they live in. It's like trying to run a Spartan race and then go to the next Spartan race. You're kind of like your body is going through a lot of the things to optimize to prepare you for. It's using up a lot of the things that it would use in the Spartan race before you ever get to the race to begin with. So it's no wonder that people, they don't want to train, they don't want to exercise, they're exhausted, they're frustrated, they're anxious, they're all these other things. And so that's what kind of the light bulb went off for me when you and I really started working together. And I knew that it's kind of a double whammy. Someone like you or I, and a lot of people that are going to listen to this, that do the extra training, that do these extra things, then you're not just existing in this toxic environment that we find ourselves in the normal modern world, is going to make it even more necessary to give our body these nutrients that we need to do that extra to keep our mitochondrial health really healthy. And otherwise, we're going to get depleted and wear our bodies down. And it's crazy. It just seems like, and I think that's what you really alerted me to, is like, well, you just have to exist in this world for all its wonders. And it's a great time for the human experience, but the world we live in is rather toxic. And so you got to defend against that. So, and then I think one of the things you really alerted me to was the gut, where it all starts and where things kind of, and so do you want to take it there, or do we need to cover anything else, or do we need to start what's the roadmap for kind of getting to baseline?
Yeah, and we did an episode on gut, and we'll do another episode on gut because of how critical it is. The gut is so people I think know this at this point. There are trillions of microorganisms of diverse species and phyla in our gut, protozoans and bacteria and viruses that are fungi and yeast that are symbiotic with us. They depend on us and we depend upon them. They play a major role in how we take in food, how we assimilate food, how we convert nutrients, and a lot of the signaling that's going on at a cell level, at the DNA level, but also in the central nervous system is based on a gut, our gut, and with including the microbiome, kind of an interface. And so it's critically important. And when you're feeding yourself or hydrating yourself, you have to realize that you're also feeding and hydrating your gut. You're actually helping to take care of these trillions of microorganisms in addition to your own cellular need. And if the food you've been eating is minimally nourishing, meaning it has a very narrow spectrum of overall nutrient availability and possibly other things that we don't consider nutrients, but that play a role in health, like various plant compounds, polyphenols, anthocyanins, et cetera, that can be helpful for our gut. If we're depleted in those things, then one, we're not going to have a diverse gut, right? We're going to really reduce the overall diversity of the gut, which is not good. And then if we're consuming toxins like glyphosate and others, we're also killing a lot of those little organisms that we're dependent upon. So the gut itself gets poisoned by the toxicants. It's undernourished because of the food selections. And ultimately, it becomes unhealthy, meaning that ecosystem of the gut biome is not diverse, it's unbalanced, and there might be overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria and viruses and fungi, or at the very least, imbalances with higher levels of various anaerobic bacteria that create these unhealthy biofilms. And then this is creating gut level inflammation, which affects digestive function, and the story goes on. So you have to really consider that when you're optimizing nutrients, you're trying to optimize them for your gut as well. And when you're eating cleaner foods that have a reduced toxicant burden, you're also trying to you're not just trying to reduce how much you're poisoning your own self, but how much you're poisoning your gut. So it's critical, and our formulations do play a role in that because they do contain unique ingredients, fulvic and humic, that play a role in helping our gut. That were a product of the soil biome, right? That used to be coded into our food, and it was nature's own detoxifying compounds and nutrient transport vehicles. Also, the diverse nutrients in our formulations feed various species of bacteria and feed our enterocytes, our gut cells, and help them maintain healthy cell membranes, et cetera. So the gut's critical, and we'll spend time. When we do a special episode on the gut, I have been able to distill it down to a real simple protocol of a handful of products that will virtually always fix the gut ecosystem if you also at the same time honor the gut's needs in your lifestyle. And when we do that, we'll share that protocol because it's really been awesome. And I've got great, I did a kind of a version of a clinical study with the maker of one of the products that we used where we remeasured gut integrity markers, and I was blown away by the results. But I'm going to veer back towards the focus on our own cells and their needs for essential macro and micronutrients to maintain structure and function, and how critical that is.
So whenever you're coming up with these formulations, and basically, and again, folks, disclaimer, yes, we own the company together. I'm not trying, this isn't some kind of hidden advertisement for it. I know some of you will be cynical and you'll think that, but honestly, that's not what the intent is. We'll tell you all about it later, but when you came up with our foundational stack, which is F1, F2, F3, so the first one, F1, being essential nutrients. So kind of talk to me about how that formulation came about. Why was it the one that's like, okay, of all the things you can take, of all the ways you can kind of try to get yourself in a better place, this is where we're going to start. What was you, as the creator of this formulation, how did you come up with that particular formulation? What was what is your hope for your patients that are on that first, that F1 stack? Kind of talk us through what is that targeting? I know obviously it's gut health and some of those other things, but and how it all works together, Gus. I mean, because that's one of the things you've taught me is like I used to probably, and a lot of people here, and this is what we don't ever want. There's certain supplements that everybody can name. I don't know if it's marketing or influencers or what, but everybody will know about creatine, then everybody will know about essential amino acids, and everybody will know about, it's something that will rise up as the supplement of the day. But whenever you were formulating the essential nutrients, kind of what makes that one special and necessary for probably almost anyone that's listening to this?
I will tell you that answer, but I also look at F1 and F2 as equally important, equally special, because both are covering essential macronutrients. They're different in what they cover. But essentially, what I had learned working with individuals was that to cover these nutritional gaps, we had to use a variety of products. So I would have individuals potentially on a good quality comprehensive multivitamin. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, depending on their micronutrient reports and their individual needs. Then we would always layer on a full spectrum B complex because as you'll see in our case study, you'll see depletion of B vitamins in virtually everyone. All right. So the standard doses of B vitamins in a multivitamin were insufficient to fix the B vitamin status of most individuals. And then I would see issues with various minerals. So some people, it might be zinc, some copper, some selenium, some iodine, that would see deficiencies in those areas. And then I would see substantial deficiencies, unless they were already supplementing, in essential fatty acids like DHA and EPA, very critical omega-3 fatty acids that are instrumental in the health of your cell membranes and tamping down inflammation, especially in the brain. Phospholipids, which technically are not an essential macronutrient, but I believe that we're often depleted in them, especially something called phosphatidylcholine. And these are critical for brain function and membranes and many other things. And then fat-soluble nutrients. Commonly, most people know that vitamin D status is not great in our country, but it would also be accompanied by low vitamin K2, often low levels of retinol, fat-soluble vitamin A, and vitamin E could be hit or miss on that, right? So this is what I'm observing, right? So this is what we're going to need to cover all these gaps. And so I would have people on B complex, possibly the multivitamin, a trace mineral complex that contained the fulvic humic that aids nutrient transport and helps with detox. And then I had them on a phospholipid complex. I had them on an essential fatty acid complex, and then potentially cod liver oil for fat soluble nutrients, and maybe even extra vitamin D or K, or possibly a blend of vitamin E if that's what they needed. So that's a lot of products.
Yeah,
now,
they got a lot of lids they're having to go through.
But you know what? They were doing it because once they did it and they fixed the issues, they felt so much better. And they're like, okay, I don't want to miss this. And if I'm not going to find it in my food very easily, then I'm just going to go ahead and supplement it. Now we'll talk about this later, but we would start with one level of supplementation to restore the system, and then we go to a different level of supplementation to maintain the system. And it's important to understand that. My daughters went off to college with a basket with every one of those things I just named because we knew their college diets were not going to provide what was needed. And my daughters have their own various little challenges and issues, but they're both emotionally and physically healthy. They take no medications. They are able to, take care of themselves. And what I realized after they communicated with me about their friends, and even some of their friends communicated with me, is that's an exception now, right, to the rule that most of these 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, they're not unhealthy, but they don't have great well-being. They have migraines, they have irritable bowel syndrome, they have reflux. Commonly, what's wrong with my gut? They have acne and eczema and possibly psoriasis. They're brain fog, they have focus issues. Many are anxious and taking. So they're not a healthy population. And, my daughters were like, yeah, we struggle with some of those things too, but not in a consistent enough manner to need to go to the doctor and take medicines for it. And I feel that the nutrient support is a big reason why. So this is what I did for my own family. And, for the people who I was working with in a private client model, they're like, okay, I don't mind it. I'll pay the money and I'll deal with the bottles. I can see the difference. We've measured the difference. But I was like, this is not scalable. And, as you know, my heart isn't just that a smaller number of people who can afford to come see me and get these tests and that I can personally advise to be able to implement these truths in their lives and experience the good health that is their birthright that God designed them for. I want the whole population around the world to experience this. And when I went on that trip to Uganda and I was observing the nutritional situation in the orphanages where they don't have enough food, right, where they literally don't have enough food. But then I was able to talk with the gentleman who has set them all up and find out what if they could get more food, what would they get? And it was more yams and plantains and some potato. And it was like, that's still not going to solve their nutrient issue. And I realized these people in these impoverished areas have the same nutrient challenges that we have. They just have a different context. They don't have enough food. They actually need more food, but their food's not going to fix their nutrient issue. And then in our country, we have excess food for most, and we have excess energy, but with insufficient nutrients. So we have plenty of energy coming into our bodies, but insufficient nutrients to maintain structure and function, which is a complete curveball to our ancestral genetics. Whereas over in Uganda, that's been the story of the human race, right? What they're living through, the body is kind of adapted to managing. As long as it can kind of get the bare minimum, it'll actually tend to hold it together. And so I came home thinking, there's no way to start solving this problem in the way that I've been solving it for my own patients and my own family. I was like, we've got to be able to create a unifying formula, some way to get all of these different ingredients into one or two formulas that could ultimately be at some point in a powdered form, distributed in volume. And, in those orphanages, I had this vision of all those kids having a portion of essentially what is our F1, F2, and F3 morning and evening. and that would actually solve the nutrient challenges. And then they can focus on, can they get enough energy from their food and some extra protein? It would make life a lot better for them, right? Just like it's made life a lot better for my patients to know I've checked the box on the essential nutrients for structure and function. Now I can just focus on clean eating and make sure I got the other stuff that I needed. Which is hard to measure, of course, because you don't really know what's exactly in the food that you're eating. So my heart was to solve a problem that's plaguing our nation and plaguing this world, nutrient sufficiency. And that's where I finally came across the company out of Oregon that could create this formulation for me, that I actually could do it for a small doctor in a small town who doesn't have a manufacturing plant and doesn't have the influence or the means to just go invest in, 10,000s of units, but could do this at least as an initial experiment for our own patients. And I was excited. And we created these formulations to the specifications and doses of what I have observed 90% of people are going to need to fill their nutritional gaps, with the idea that if individuals would be willing to use our F1 essential nutrients and F2 and potentially our essential aminos, those are optional, but I think quite helpful, that it would make a big difference in their nutrient status, which will make a big difference in their health and help their body resist disease. Now, essential nutrients was exactly what I described. It was the full spectrum of B vitamins, the full spectrum of necessary minerals, other vitamins that are important, including carotenoids, which are plant forms of vitamin A, the diverse carotenoids, not just beta carotene, but zeaxanthin and others that are good for eyes and brain, et cetera, that are important antioxidants. And then the linchpin was being able to get that fulvic and humic in that capsule too, so that nutrient transport issue is resolved from gut to blood and from blood to inside the cell, and you're getting the detox benefits of the fulvic and humic. So I was able to put all of that into F1, essential nutrients, which is essentially our water-soluble product, right? So these are water-soluble nutrients that we've all packaged together, a capsule twice a day, and you'll have hit your benchmark. And it has the effective doses. Now, that said, I'll have some patients, based on their unique biochemistry, who may need a little more of a few of those nutrients, and we'll be able to tweak that as we need to. But this will solve it for the vast majority of the people that I've observed and seen, and I believe for a lot of the population. And then F2 was the fats, right? How do we solve the issue with the essential fats, which could be arguably almost more important than the essential water-soluble nutrients? Because of the critical role of the trillions of cell membranes and the mitochondrial membranes and the way that fats are utilized in our body. And so that's where I was able to take a healthy dose of phospholipids, including phosphatidylcholine and some phosphatidylserine, which arguably is not essential, but it's very helpful. I was able to get the omega-3s, DHA, and EPA in the right ratios and suitable doses that for most people who eat some omega-3, that'll get them to their level. We were able to add CoQ10, which is a little bit of a luxury item. Not everybody needs it, but in my testing, a lot of people are depleted. I think it's a sign of mitochondrial issues, and so we're actually able to replace that. And then we were able to get to the dosing of fat-soluble vitamin A, vitamin D3, vitamin K2, and also vitamin E in the form of mixed tocopherols and alpha tocopherol, so that we knew that we had those important fat-soluble nutrients covered. And so that's where I finally got to it with these formulas, and that's what's in them, and that's what they're designed to do.
And I know that you've talked about this, but I want to, I guess it's just because if I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone listening to this for the first time that has not sat with you the hours that I have in understanding cellular health, and that a lot of what we see on the outside is a reflection of all the cells that we're made up of, and how you're able to quantify the results of what we're talking about, because that is something that you go into in a very in-depth way with your patients. Is I'm not just like you said, there can be a placebo effect. You can give somebody some supplements and they go, I'm feeling better. But what you have developed and what we're talking about is based on, I'm looking at your cells and the deficiencies that they have today, and then I look at them tomorrow and the next day, and I see the changes at the cellular level. I think that's one of the things that I want people to know. And Gus, I'm probably when people talk to me now, I tell them, I told you that if anyone asks me, should I take, fill in the blank supplement, I say, well, the first thing I'm going to tell you, and again, you may not like this as my business partner, I'm probably the worst supplement salesman on earth, because the first thing I do is say, well, tell me about how you're eating, tell me about how you're exercising, tell me about your physical environment. And then the one that's really big, I say, can you share with me some of your blood work? Not like show me your panels, but have you gone to a physician and had them run blood work on you to see? But until you can tell me until we can grade all those things, I really don't feel comfortable telling you, yeah, sure. Now, there are some things, like I mentioned creatine earlier. I'm going to take 5 grams of creatine every day, but that's just kind of a universal overall thing that we can all benefit from. But it's not looking at the cellular level. Should I take, I don't know, if like you mentioned magnesium earlier. Okay, well, that one, it's a good chance you need it, because so many people are so deficient in it, but you may be the rare exception. I don't know. I'm not just going to tell you, sure, go take this, if you can't tell me all these things you've done and to try to quantify it. So I think that may be a good segue into going over. I think you've got some results and you may not be ready for it.
Yeah.
You're not, but I do want people to understand that everything we're talking about, it's not about make you run faster, jump higher, have a brighter smile just because, you've taken some supplements. No, it's about where you were before. You start to target your cellular health, and then you look and you can literally see this is a healthier cell. And the cool thing is the way you feel, your energy levels, your skin, what's inside will project outwardly. But that's
But
so
we
much of your
cannot
practice.
promise that the teeth will get wider.
Yeah, no teeth whitening. Exactly.
Yeah, but you may actually jump a little higher and run a little faster.
Why not?
If you were depleted in these nutrients and had unhealthy cell membranes and poor mitochondrial efficiency and low levels of ability and overwhelmed with oxidants, and you clean that up, you probably have a little more power and strength and capacity. So, it is a big difference in performance to be nutrient optimized versus nutrient depleted. There's no question about that.
Well, one of the things, we've talked about in the past, and we need to get him with you, but he's like trying to get a handful of Jello, as I've said before, which I think he's already ordered his foundational stack, though, is Josh Tomlin, retired Major League Baseball pitcher for both of our favorite team, the Atlanta Braves, World Series champion. Josh is like, while he's retired, he's like, if I could extend my career, he said, there's so many players that, mentally and by most levels physically, they could get another couple of years out, but they haven't taken these steps. Now, a lot of them are getting better. I think that, this really nutritional science is really playing much more of a role in professional sports than it ever has. But that's the cool thing about this, folks, is that you will be able to get more out of your life. I mean, I saw this, Jimlin was showing me, Gus, these pictures of what 50, which is what I'm about to turn, what 50 used to look like, which is think the Golden Girls, with the exception of like Betty White. Most of those women were like 50 or like early 50s, versus now Jennifer Lopez. That's the new 50. It's crazy that the changes we've made. And so, folks, if you start to take care of your cellular health, and you don't have to have all the trainers and millions of dollars, everything that people have to make Jennifer Lopez look the way she looks at 50. If you just take care of your cellular health, it's crazy. I mean, this whole, I hate saying those cliche things like 50 is the new 40 or whatever like that. But I can tell you this, brother, I know you and I are working together on keeping me under 50 biologically as long as possible, but I can honestly say that at nearly 50 years old, I get through my workouts and I do as well or better than I did when I was 35 years old. And I was in pretty decent shape when I was 35, but I wasn't dialed into not toxifying my body through alcohol, eating better, eating more whole foods, dialing in my sleep, doing the supplementation. I'm taking the steps necessary that I have to take at 50 so that I can have that performance. And I'm not the only one. I'm not unique. Everyone listening to this can do that. So
Yeah. The at 35, I had newborn twins and a fledgling medical practice, and
whew,
felt like I was an imposter doctor, imposter businessman, imposter father, and imposter husband. So I definitely feel a lot better now than I felt then. But there's no doubt with aging that there is some reduction in our capacities. But it's remarkable the difference in what we can retain when we're attentive. And there's a real simple formula to remember. It's so simple, and it probably applies to every important domain of life, for how to live as long as God's going to let you live. That's in his hands, but to live well as long as that time. And it's make sure that your body has the information it needs to work well, i.e. nutrient sufficiency, right? Like that's critical. It's got to have this if it's going to take care of itself and manage exposures. 2, minimize the wrong information to our body, i.e. toxins and alcohol and, excessive stress and radiation and blah, blah, blah. And 3, make sure the good information is as comprehensive as possible so you express the most robust epigenetic version of yourself. And that's where hormetic stressors that we've discussed in the past, like fasting and physical training for VO2 max and strength and breath work and breath holding and carbon dioxide training and cold exposure and heat. That's where all that comes in, right? So that you maintain this high level of resiliency and robustness, and you maintain you're more anti-fragile. So it's that simple. Give your body the information it needs, nutritional sufficiency, plus sleep and other things, and social and spiritual. 2, keep the bad stuff out or minimize it at least. That's what the game we're playing is, minimize it. And 3, make sure the good stuff is as comprehensive as possible. It's really that simple.
Can I tell you something that's really cool that you mentioned there? What you mentioned cold and heat and some of the things, some of the therapeutics that we do. So, because you came and you gave me an ice barrel complex when you were at my house and you told me it looked like a big rancid, hot barrel of, just hot, nasty water. And so I was like, I told Jimlin, I said, Gus doesn't like my ice barrel. He said it looks really, like bad. No, I'm just kidding. It was disgusting. It was a barrel full of hot water. In the summer, it wouldn't work. But guess what I've got going? So ice barrel, they now make a chiller that you can attach to the ice barrel, which I'm so glad they finally got on that train, because I was about to drop a lot more money on one of the cold plunge, the bigger cold plunges.
Yeah.
But before I did that, I was like, and it wasn't cheap. I mean, the actual chiller, it's one of the best on the market. It should be arriving. I just got an email that they now are about to ship them. I had to pre-order mine. But the next time you're in Texas, the ice barrel will have a chiller circulating the water. It will be ice cold. It gets down to 39 degrees.
Oh, wow.
It'll be clean. It'll be fantastic. So just so you know.
That's exciting. Yes.
No, I'm pumped.
Yes.
I'm so pumped.
Hey, I'll need you to let me share so I can show people.
All right, just a second. I'm going to get that.
Let me go to share.
All right, you should go to share your screen now.
All right. So what I'm going to be sharing with our viewers and listeners is this is a new patient. He's in his mid to late 40s. He's not feeling great. He's been very successful in the insurance business, but he's realized that his health has deteriorated. He feels good, like emotionally. He's a spiritual person, but he is like, I got to get a good health assessment because something's not quite right. And so this is just 2 of the reports that we have for this gentleman, but this is basically par for the course for the individuals on initial assessment, male, female, 30-year-old, 50-year-old, 70-year-old, who are not actively filling nutritional gaps through supplementation.
Hey, Gus, real quick, I want to ask you something, because Troy and I are trying to work on this, trying to solve for this, making this really easy and make it more common for people to get this sort of report. So this patient comes to see you. What was this just went into your office and got blood drawn and then you guys sent it off? What was the process to get this report taken or done?
He lives across the state.
Okay.
So we sent him these kits and then we helped him identify a phlebotomist that would come and draw these kits.
And one of the things I learned through going through this process, which the first one got canceled, but just so you know, folks, that if you do this, like Dr. Gus, and this isn't a plug again for Dr. Gus, but if your physician, if they're not in your city, they can ship you the test, and then that company partners with phlebotomists that will actually come to your house. They make it really easy. They can come to your house. They can draw the blood. You don't have to worry about it. And then you just send it off to the physician so that you can get this report back. I mean, a lot of people that, if you've never been proactive about getting your blood drawn anywhere other than the way I used to do it before I met Gus, which was going to my primary care physician for my annual, and then going to next door to where they had a little lab and getting my blood drawn, and then getting, basically I didn't get anything back unless there was bad news. But just so you know, folks, this is not a complicated process. You can, if you go, and if, again, we could put in the show notes how to contact Dr. Gus and his team so they could send you this, and you could get this sort of detailed report. Which, one more thing, and then I'll shut up. This is far more in depth, and going over it with a physician like Gus, who is more in tune to precision and integrative health than just a primary care physician. It's not a knock on on primary care physicians. That's Gus started out. That's what he's done for 3 decades. But a lot of them, they'll get the blood results back. These reports, according to Troy Jackson, our other business partner, a physician in Gus's office, these reports, the basic ones, are kind of the same ones that they've been doing for 30 years. And as long as you're within the general population range, you're going to be okay. It does not go in depth like this, like what we're about to see. So I know that was a long-winded way of saying this is not, Gus, is it safe to say this is not what you're going to get at most just primary care physician, get your blood drawn and get a report?
No, and you're not going to be able to get this. And look, I trained in family medicine and ran a family practice, still do, for 20 plus years now. I didn't know how to do this.
Right.
I wasn't trained in this, right? This wasn't part of what I was doing. So it's something, though, it's not hard to learn. And the truth is that the most people who are interested in this they can elect to join one of our precision health programs and make that kind of investment. Most probably aren't. If people are interested, you'll work with our health coach who knows how to interpret this report and tell you exactly what it tells you and what you need. And that's not an expensive model, the cost of the test plus a little health coaching time. So we have that available as an option. People can ask for a health coach consultation and can select their test: toxicant, gut, cell membrane, micronutrient, and get get this information and know exactly what we would program for them.
And I think that's important, guys, because I just, again, maybe it's just me, but I think a lot of people out there, they don't know the difference between family practice, primary care physician, precision medicine, functional medicine, all these different terms. They don't know. And so I want people to understand that, if you were to go to your basic family practice doctor, unless they're like Gus and Troy, and as part of their practice is precision care, then you're not going to get this report. And this is the one too that, like I said earlier, you asked me if somebody were to come to me and say, should I take this supplement? This report that Gus is about to go over, if I could just snap my fingers and in a perfect world, everyone would have this. I mean, this is to me, like, before you really get on a supplementation or any type, or just leave supplements aside, understanding your body at the cellular level, to me, this is where true health care versus sick care, this is where it starts. That's just one man's opinion, but that's what I think.
And I completely agree with you, Jason. I'm a data hound. I love it. That's what I want. I want it on myself. I want it on my family. I want it on our patients. Realistically, not everybody's going to be able to afford this type of testing. Our protocols, our formulations are designed for individuals who can't afford this testing.
Right.
Because I can just go ahead and say that if you're not already, using the types of formulations that we create, you don't have to use ours, but some combination that achieves that. And then your report is going to look a lot like this. Yep. It just is. That's what we're going to see. And so if it's like, I just don't have any extra cash right now for diagnostics and health coaching, but I'd love to fill the nutritional gaps that I probably have, well, there we go. That's it. Oh, and the other thing earlier about our formulations, why did I create them? Because I couldn't find them, right? Yeah. Up until that day, I had never thought about creating my own formulation. I had outsourced everything to great companies, Thorne and Biooptimizers and many others. I went looking for someone who had created a multivitamin of sorts that had the kind of dosing that I had identified was needed. I couldn't find it. It wasn't available. And so that's ultimately I created the formulation because it needed to be created and it wasn't available.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So this individual, and I'm not going to, we could spend an hour on this and we're not going to. We did a whole micronutrient podcast where we went through this in detail. Essentially, we're looking at a nutrient, we're looking at its presence in the bloodstream here, which will be recent status. Maybe they've gotten some in their food or took a supplement. And then we're looking at the present and how much is inside the cell. And that'll be more of a long-term status. And then, of course, there can be flux. The body could be actively transporting nutrients into the cell. So we don't want to overinterpret these. The green area is the normal area with an average range. Now, obviously, for high performance, you want to be above average. You don't want to be down here. And what you're going to see, and I'm going to really focus in primarily on his intracellular status, because that's what's most important for time's sake. Vitamin A intracellularly, I would call that not deficient, but borderline insufficient. Vitamin B1, thiamine, insufficient. Vitamin B2, riboflavin, critical, insufficient. Very common insufficiency deficiency. Vitamin B3, niacin, actually deficient. This is the basis of NAD production, right? So this is critical. Vitamin B6, insufficient. B12 is okay. B5, pantothenic acid, insufficient. Vitamin C intracellularly, not great. Very important antioxidant. D3, borderline insufficient. Vitamin D, not so bad, but not awesome. Vitamin E, borderline deficient, insufficient. K1, a water-soluble version of vitamin K that's converted to K2, insufficient. K2, but not great. Folate actually has a lot out here, not a lot in here. This gets into intracellular transport. May not be an issue, but if it is, that's where the fulvic and humic compounds come in to help aid in that.
That's a good one to take off. So just because there's a high presence of it doesn't mean it's actually getting into the cell where it's actually needed, which that in turn is a transport issue, which that's what you try to solve for, right, Gus?
Yes, that's right. And I'm not saying we've solved it perfectly, but two molecules that aid immensely in transport are fulvic and humic, which used to be natural in our soil, created by the soil biome. Now it's depleted because of what we've done to the soil. That is in our formulation to aid nutrient.
And here's why I bring this up. Again, these are the things that I've learned and I get excited about them. And I try to assume that the folks listening to this, they haven't been practicing this stuff for 3 decades like Gus, is whenever you take these things, you have to understand that there is a chain reaction effect to a lot of the supplementation. And when we say things like transport or signaling, this is, again, I'm not the expert. So please, I'm not trying to come off as the expert. This is me kind of learning out loud, is whenever Gus sees the presence of a molecule, but it's not getting into the cell, there are actual things that you can do to actually make the molecule that you're trying to benefit from. And if if you're taking something that's not even getting to the cell, well, you're wasting your money. So, but we can figure out ways to get better signaling, get better transport to make sure that it's getting into the cell where it's needed. Otherwise, you're just, again, going back to all those bottle caps in your pantry, you're just cramming on your mouth and you think because I take it, it goes in the gut, it digests and boom, I've taken my supplements. It's just more to that. And that's what I always want us to do for folks, Gus, is to give them just that little bit of a further education that it's not so simple as just having some influencer say, hey, take this, you'll be stronger, you'll have a better morning wood, whatever, thicker hair. There's more to it than just the supplement. It's everything working together the way it's supposed to. And it's a very precise design. And that's how Gus looks at this. And so again, Gus, you've done this for so long. That's just kind of second nature to you. But I got to believe that the listener out there, a lot of them are going, I never even thought about the fact that just taking one supplement might not actually reach the cell. But if I stack it with something else, then that can enhance the transport of it into the cell. I don't want to gloss over that, because to me, it's one of those things that was a huge light bulb for me.
Yeah, because of the people who would sign up with me who are high performers and biohackers were already aggressively supplementing. Mm-hmm. But often what I would see on their panel was everything was way up there, high average in the serum, but it was still depleted intracellularly. And I started scratching my head because I'm like, I can't just dose him on more supplements and solve this problem. What am I missing? Which led me through my network of researchers to the understanding of Fulvic and Humic and the role they play. I know there's others that I need to learn that are part of this kind of dynamic, complex system, but Fulvic and Humic make a big difference. And that's why it's a critical part of our formulas to have that in there.
And this is one thing, and I won't go on a big tangent. I'm sorry. I get excited about this. Working with someone like Gus, your physician or somebody else, Gus is going to ask the right question. Gus is going to look at this and go, I don't understand it. Jason is healthy. He's supplementing. I look at his blood. He has this molecule present. Why is it not getting to the cell? And then that's where the research starts is why is it there but not making its way into the cell? What is going on? And those are, having the understanding to one, look at the data, then ask the right question. That's how you solve for these issues. And that's what I personally would encourage every single listener out there to do. Go figure out what questions you need to be asking your physician so that you can solve for these sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
So folate, we already talked about. Calcium, okay. Manganese, a little depleted, but the manganese is complex, so I'm not going to go into that. Zinc actually looks pretty good. He was taking some zinc. Copper, so-so. Chromium looks pretty good. Iron looks fine. Magnesium levels look good. He was taking magnesium. Choline, very depleted, and you'll see this on his prodrome report. And then amino acid metabolites. This gets into complexity I don't want to try to cover today, Jason. I think it's too much, but I think we're giving people the general idea of what we're seeing. So we get into some amino acids here, and we can see that serine, which is derived from glycine, is a little low, and he does have some anxiety, and that can kind of play into that. And then, if you look at his essential aminos, like branch chain, they're not great, right? So we probably have some protein insufficiency, and I can tell you based on all of the serum labs that I have for other metrics, he is probably protein insufficient and needs to eat more protein. He's probably feeling like he's eating plenty of protein, but it's really not enough. Plus, his gut issues are affecting how well he digests and is able to utilize that. CoQ10, cysteine, an important amino acid, basis of glutathione, among other things, pretty depleted. Glutathione, pretty low. In a morning fasting specimen, it should be restored. It's not great. Selenium levels are so-so. And then we have fatty acids. Omega-3s, EPA is pretty low. DHA.
Hey, real quick, Gus, I want to ask you a question about glutathione because I know that you and I have covered that at length. What age? I know that glutathione is one of those things that naturally starts to regress as we get older. This guy's in his 40s. Is that kind of what you would expect to see from his age?
Not necessarily. It really depends on their genetics and their toxicant burden and their environment, if they drink alcohol or not. So it's really it's variable.
Okay.
But I have the glutathione pathway genetics and can predict kind of whose system's more robust, who isn't. And then we have toxicant reports, and they tell me all about all their habits, and you can kind of almost guess where people are going to fall out. But if people aren't actively supporting glutathione in our modern environments over 50, they're probably going to be depleted, and it would be really helpful. So this is a incredibly complex report that's used for assessments of early detection of neurodegenerative diseases and cancers. My main point here is looking at biosystem sufficiencies, nutrients, phospholipids, phosphatidylethanolamine, only at the 28th percentile, right? Not great. He's still making some plasmalogens, but the levels aren't great. And then when you look at his choline, phosphatidylcholine, we already saw that it's not looking good on his other report, specifically phosphatidylcholine, only at 30%. This should be up here at 80%. His DHA down here around the 16th percentile. Omega-9 fatty acids like oleic acid, olive oil, avocado, only at the 7th percentile. So we also have some substantial insufficiencies in the areas of these important fats that make up our cell membranes, right? So I'm going to stop sharing now and get back to this. Like, this is par for the course, right? So this guy has requested my services because for his age and his overall lifestyle, he believes he should have more energy, that he should have a better mood, that he should have less anxiety, that he should not have been adding slowly 15 pounds onto his belly. And he's right. He shouldn't have all those things. And we've got a lot of different things we're going to work with for him. But this is obvious, right? Like, if this is the only thing I had, this can already tell a story about all of that, right there, that these nutrient insufficiencies and deficiencies are in fact going to contribute to fatigue, brain fog, depression, because neurotransmitters are built out of nutrients, anxiety, low exercise capacity, poor mitochondrial function. And because someone who is nutrient insufficient is hungrier because their body wants to solve the nutrient problems, not calorie problems, they end up eating more and having more cravings, and they end up eating more of the foods that aren't solving the problem in the first place, and they do end up gaining weight. Right. So if all I did was optimize his nutrients and phospholipids, because he doesn't have any disease, this is full blood work, and got him into a good training program and just cleaned up his lifestyle, he's going to get a long way down the road to his particular goals by just fixing this one thing. And a shameless plug, I guess. Guess what he's going to be going on for this? Our F1, F2, and F3 supplements. That's what he's going to have. He's not going to have to do what all my patients up until recently had to do, which is to get the 8 different products so that we can solve all these problems. He's just going to be on F1, F2, and if he'll use our amino acids, F3, and that's going to take care of this. And then we could actually, I guess that's a good transition to say, okay, what does it mean to restore versus, maintain? And that's real simple. We're going to push in pretty hard with high nutrient density. That's just the standard doses of our formulations. For the first 2 to 3 months, I'll be reassessing these metrics in a few months. And if everything looks good and the body's assimilating it well, because we'll ask the question, like, if something's not quite fixing, all right, where's the problem? It won't be that the nutrients weren't being supplied to the body. Right now, the nutrients are mostly not being supplied to the body. We know that. That's part of the big part of the problem. But if it all works the way it usually does, then we will be able to say, hey, you should continue our formulation to make sure you get plenty of protein and probably use plenty of the amino acids, especially if we're trying to build muscle and lose fat. But with F1 and F2, you could go to 5 days out of 7, or you could take a little lower doses every day if you prefer, right? You don't have to take the full load every single day because our bodies were designed in an ancestral fashion to conserve and recycle nutrients. We just got to get them back to full health, cell membranes reinvigorated, mitochondria reinvigorated, detox systems back online, digestive systems, get all that stuff fixed. And then all we got to do is make sure we keep pulsing them in.
One of the things that you mentioned there really quickly that you and I have talked at length about before is that when you get your nutrition dialed in, it really is, it'll blow your mind, folks, how much less food you're going to want to eat and how much food your hunger almost goes away. And I think what James Quandall, our other business partner, sent us that his dad said was so spot on, and it parallels with stuff that you've told me about before, is when he said something to the effect, and I'm paraphrasing, that eating all these wrong foods and feeling hungry is just our body seeking nutrition in the form of being hungry. And you're the one that kind of alerted me to the fact that a lot of times when we have those hunger pangs, now sometimes it's because you just need to eat, you need some fuel. But a lot of it too, if you're listening to this and you're someone that you're wondering why that you don't train, you don't exercise, you sit at a desk for most of your work day, and you sit in a car, so you don't burn a lot of calories, but you're just famished by the time you get home or at lunch, that might not be that you're needing energy, but you're just needing nutrients. And when you start to dial this stuff in because remember, all supplements is a high concentrated dose of the good things, the molecules that are in the foods that you're not getting from eating 10 pounds of broccoli or half a side of perfectly lean beef or a big slab in the middle of the day of great omega-3 rich salmon or something like that. Instead, since you're not doing that, you're just getting a high concentrated dose of the nutrient that you're not getting from your food. And once you have that nutrients, I'm telling you, like Gus today, great example. I did an hour-long zone 2 workout early this morning, and the only thing, and I have the first thing I have for breakfast every morning, if you can call it that, is my first dose of essential amino acids. So folks, so that you know, that's no calories, but it gives me a protein synthesis equivalent to about what, Gus? It's 20 grams of whey protein?
Yeah, 20. Well, actually more if it's whey protein. If you're comparing it against eggs, it's probably it's like consuming 2 eggs, but
Okay.
because that's such a healthy, highly utilizable source. So what I tell people is you can count on it being 20 to 25 grams of
There you go.
protein equivalency.
There you go. So that's what I had early this morning. Then around 11:30ish, I have my protein shake. I haven't had anything for the rest of the day. And I'm a little hungry, but I'm not like starving. I'm not telling you folks, by the way, I am not telling you to start reducing. It has nothing to do with calories. What I'm saying right now has nothing to do with calories, but I can tell you that by dialing in my nutrients, then I don't need as much food. And I train hard every day just because that's what I like to do. That's my mental therapy as much as my health. It's the closest thing I have to a hobby is health and wellness. And so I think that's one of the things that you taught me, Gus, that really was it was just eye-opening and it's so true. Folks, if you want to know why you wake up hungry after a big night of enchiladas or you go on vacation and you just seems like you can and you're just eating really really bad foods but you're hungry by the next meal, a lot of it is because your body's not getting the nutrients it needs and it's craving the nutrients, not just more energy slash calories. So I just think that's
Absolutely.
an important
You
point.
and I, as you know, we both know we have very similar lifestyles. In fact,
Mhm.
a lot of the people who are really focused in on health and wellness and fitness end up finding their way to a similar pattern that you and I have adopted. Which
Mhm.
is you wake up in the morning and you deliver nutrients into your body. You may not eat a lot of food. Some people who prefer to front load their diet might eat a lot of food in the morning, but they're not going to eat much in the evening,
Right.
right? But otherwise, you're delivering the nutrients, the amino acids. For me, it also includes nitric oxide support. I include F1 and F2. I used to take all the other stuff. Now I'm just taking F1, F2, and I've been doing that for a few weeks because I got the product first. And I can tell you, I feel just as good. There's no drop off in anything since switching, and I'm much happier because it's less time and it's just easier down, less capsules, the whole thing. But I'll take F1, F2. I take my aminos. I train hard, and then I move into other things. I'll have my whole protein concoction, which we all have our versions of that, where we add possibly collagen and greens or spirulina, and that satisfies me for hours. By mid-afternoon, I'll get a little bit hungry. What do? I take F1, F2, and F3 again, my second portion of F1 and F2, another portion of F3, and guess what happens within 20 minutes? The hunger disappears,
Yep.
gone. And I
Yep.
don't even get hungry again until we're approaching dinner. And even then, I'm not that hungry. But we'll go ahead and prepare a really healthy dinner and cook good foods and tasty foods, and we'll enjoy that together, my wife and I and our family when they're around. So it's a real simple pattern, but I would challenge people who maybe they want to try our formulations and they get a set the next time that it's mid-afternoon and sometimes hunger is a craving because you're bored or you're restless and you need to satisfy some type of emotional need, of course. But if you kind of tend to feel like you're getting hungry and needing energy at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, try this. Take a dose of F1, F2, and F3 and see what happens within the next 30 minutes to an hour. I would wager that a lot of the listeners would find out that their hunger went away.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I can attest to it. And, so I also want to say something. And first of all, okay, what I'm about to say, folks, I'm not telling you to not eat organic. In fact, we encourage everyone to eat organic every single chance you get. Okay. But the reality is, and it's just psychology. If you look at the difference in cost, most people will say, I'm not going to eat organic because it just costs too much. Well, when you do the math, just let me just tell you, it's not that much money, especially whenever you look at the increase of non-organic versus organic. You take that delta and you apply it to other things you spend money on. It's not a great amount of money. So let me just tell you right now, eat organic every time you can. But if you're someone that doesn't want to go through the trouble of seeking out all organic, you're not a member of Thrive Markets, you're not ordering organic food, and or you just think, you know what, it just costs too much. One of the things I told Gus that I'm hoping that people adopt this, they'll say, you know what, I don't eat organic, but I don't feel quite so bad about it because I'm going to go ahead and do something to give myself the support that I'm not getting by not eating the best, most nutritionally dense foods I can. this stack that Gus has developed, that's the way I'm looking at it, because Jimlin and I, we try to buy as much organic as we possibly can, but there are some things that we don't. And as a result, I want to know that I'm trying to close that nutritional gap through supplementation. And that's one of the things that I think it's one of the greatest benefits to any form of good, high quality, which obviously ours are the highest quality, third party tested. We like Gus said, he would not do this if he had not found the right partner from a manufacturing standpoint to make sure that his ingredients that meet his quality standards could go into these products. This is one of the ways that you can, I don't want to say, because I'll get in trouble for saying you can eat organic without eating organic. This is a way that you can close that nutritional gap. If you're someone that's just not going to eat organic every time, this will help kind of be an insurance policy against that. I didn't say anything too out of line, did I, Gus? I don't want to make any false promises.
No, you didn't. I'm going to offer just a slightly different twist on it. Okay. I think it's important to understand that organic may mean more nutritionally dense, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. Organic means probably less toxic.
Less toxic. Right? That's great.
And if it was a local regenerative farmer who's tested their soil and restored, then yeah, it's going to be more nutrient dense as well. Right. But it might not mean that. So the way I look at it is, if I use these formulations, I don't need nearly as much food to maintain essential macro and micronutrients. So I can therefore eat less food and still be totally satisfied. My body has everything it needs, which means I can actually try to mostly buy the more expensive organics and things like that, because I'm not buying the same volume of food that I once was. But I'm in agreement with you. People have to be able to do what they can do, right? And it's important that you try to, as much as possible, make sure your food is non-toxic. It can make a big difference for your gut and your health, but I know there are limitations around that. At least if your body has the nutrients it needs in the fulvic humic, at least it has a chance to optimize detox systems and manage the load of the not good stuff coming in. If you're nutrient compromised and you're getting a load of toxicants, you're sheep to the slaughter. It's not immediate. You don't notice it on day one. I mean, actually, a 40 and 50-year-olds who, after they eat, feel sick and gross and inflamed are noticing that, actually. But it's a slow erosion over time, where then, and to the day that you finally come into the doctor because you're like, my exhaustion is worse, my muscle pain is worse, my headaches are worse, I'm so depressed, and you're diagnosed with major depression and fibromyalgia and a couple of other conditions and put on a bunch of medications, which I have patients who I treat with medications for these conditions that are real, they're legitimate. But if you went and fixed nutritional sufficiency, you might not ever develop those, or if you did, they'd be much more mild.
One of the things that I want to close with, and you probably have some comments on this, because when you were in medical school, well, that's one of the questions I want you to answer after I get through with this statement, is how much training you got as a physician in medical school on nutrition. I think that'll blow some people's minds. And two, I find it, and again, I don't want to generalize, but I continue to be amazed at how many professionals, and again, it's because they were trained in Western medicine, how many physicians don't truly understand what we've just talked about as far as the role nutrition plays in health and well-being. It's really quite astonishing, unless they are like you and Troy and have gone into precision medicine and functional medicine and understanding it. It is mind-blowing, the doctors I talk to. But how much nutritional training did you get in medical school?
Well, I went to medical school 27 years ago, so it could have changed.
It's just a couple. That wasn't too long ago.
So it could have changed, but we had a very good education at that time. Really, really good. We had one didactic class. It was mostly around things like, macronutrients and calories, and, a little bit of a description around vitamins and what they do as catalysts. And then in our rotations, we occasionally had someone, a clinician like in psychiatry or something else, that would speak briefly about nutrients and their role in health, but it very, very little. And I would have never hypothesized at that time that our population would be as nutrient compromised as it is, because most people are overfed and dealing with excess like body fat, and therefore the thought would be they don't have a problem. But when I begin to realize the distinction between food for energy, i.e. calories, carbon, and food for nutrients, it was kind of like, aha, we get it, right? And our nervous systems are seeking all of those elements from food, but what they're seeking a little more urgently from a sensing standpoint, we sense what's coming into the body, the nervous system does, is the essential nutrients more than the calories, because our bodies were designed with energy reserve systems that can see us through periods of food scarcity, provided they don't go on too long and they're not too severe. Whereas once we've used up our reserve of essential nutrients, structure and function will start breaking down, period. Right. And so it's critical. And so very, very little training. Most clinicians don't know a lot about this. I don't blame them. They're not being taught. They're very, very busy in their clinics. I do get discouraged when sometimes I'll have a patient who clearly does have dementia, brain atrophy, and I've started them on the kind of support that I think is very important, that research institutes like Dr. Diane Goodenou's are proving can to stabilize Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So I'll start them on heavy doses of phospholipids and essential fatty acids and carnitine and NAC and CoQ10 and also plasmalogen precursors. And then they get to the dementia clinic and they say, that stuff isn't probably helping you. And I'm like, okay, I understand that you don't know about it and I don't have any problem, but you can't say whether or not it's helpful because you haven't looked into it. And that's where it becomes challenging, is when clinicians go beyond what their competency would allow them to do.
Yeah. 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 And one of the things that, and this is why you're seeing a lot and that I bring that up, folks, because of what Gus just said. There is still, I think it's waning a bit. I think there's just too much information. There's too many Gus Vickerys and Mark Hyman and, in the non-medical professional, Ben Greenfield, in the neuroscience with Andrew Huberman. And there's just so much out there now that people are having to wake up and face this whole idea of preventive care, of nutrition and all these things. But there's a good chance, folks, that your doctor was not trained in it, hasn't paid attention to it. And it's not shame on them. It's just the way they were trained to diagnose, prescribe, reset your broken arm. And so don't be surprised if that's the case. And, I always think it's sad, Gus. And when I see a primary care physician that instead of dialing into what we're talking about, instead of making that part of their practice, the precision care, they decide to start doing stuff like treating low T, lasering pubic hairs, giving Botox, and doing all this other elective stuff. I know why they're doing it. They're under financial pressure. They're business people. They've been, medicine to have a clinic has become such a, as I know I'm preaching to the choir. It's such a hard proposition these days. And so they need to make more streams of revenue, but they choose that instead of, doing something that meshes so well, which again, you and Troy have done. It is like, why don't we take this practice that is built for taking care? If you're sick, come see me and let me help you get better. But also let me help you prevent being ill at all. Let's make that. I'm hoping that we can help promote that idea.
Yeah, the things that I'm spending most of my time on, at least for the first few months with new patients, are really just the foundational things. Yeah. So people love to come in, and if they are listening to the people like Ben Greenfield, who I think is awesome with what he does, then they're excited about, bioregulatory peptides and other peptides and mitochondrial tonics and NAD. And I'm like, you know what? The next 3 months is not going to be all that exciting stuff, because why would you try to put a turbo on an engine that has dirty valves and, it can't clear exhaust? Like, let's get the motor running again, and then let's go ahead and supercharge it. So the guy we just looked at, he's not listening to this podcast, but if he was, he may have thought, oh, if I go on NMN or NR, I'll increase NAD and I'll be able to get more energy, and that'll be good for my longevity. And while it's true that he might get a boost in NAD by using those, he's actually deficient in niacin, which is what NAD is made of in the first place, right?
Yep.
And or somebody comes in and they've got low testosterone. Sure, fix hormones, right? But you don't necessarily have to use testosterone. We'll do an episode on testosterone because I think people will appreciate that. But don't just start jumping in and fixing hormones without addressing nutrients, right? Like give the body what it's got to have and make sure that information is as comprehensive as possible. And then, of course, what I realized is when we have completed that foundational work and we've cleared a lot of their toxicant burden, not all of it. We've helped their guts get much healthier. We've optimized nutrient status and cell membranes and improved mitochondrial efficiency. Their interest in all the kind of sexy stuff has declined a little because they're like, I feel so good. Right? Like, I could try that, but I don't know that I need to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope folks that we've answered some questions with my goal before we ever got on, I told Gus, I just want people to be able to answer the question. One, is supplementation necessary? Is it something worthwhile? Get a better understanding of nutrition and how to move the needle. And then for me too, I think understanding your body at the cellular level is so critical. I hope that we've made that point abundantly clear. Gus, do we need to cover anything else?
No, I think we did it. One last thing to say, if any of the listeners actually are interested in our F1, F2 and explore them, note that they're not cheap as supplements go, right? Because they're combining a lot of different products. I will tell you, compared to what it costs to get this done, before we had these formulations, they're much less expensive than what my patients were spending. But we're aware of this. And as we discussed earlier, we want to be part of a solution for a much bigger problem for far more people. And so this was our, first push in. We manufactured smaller numbers. And as we grow and can increase manufacturing, we're committed to bringing that price point down. And we already know that we're going to be able to do that. So what you see in terms of pricing today, it's not like a big inflated price. It's really not. Our margins are less than what most supplement companies have. It's based on what it took to get this kind of nutrient density and this diverse array of compounds and molecules into these formulations. But as we grow and manufacture more, we'll be able to drop that cost down, hopefully to a very family-friendly price point. And if it really took off and God blessed it and it was highly prosperous, as you and I have talked about, Jason, we will likely then want to take a big chunk of the profits and subsidize seeing, can we get these into those orphanages in Uganda?
Yeah, 100%. And so if you are interested, you want to learn more, go to shopauthentichealth.com, shopauthentichealth.com. And one of the things I'll tell you right now, Gus, talking about the price of it, you could buy the entire foundational stack and spend probably on a month's supply less than what a lot of people are probably spending at the grocery store right now. And so you would, and if you start eating less food and eating better foods, and you're supplementing with these nutrients and these molecules, then your overall grocery bill goes down, and you actually get a better financial position by cleaning up your health. I mean, so maybe we'll do that math. But anyway, check it out, folks. Shopauthentichealth.com. We'd be grateful if you just took a look. If you have any questions, then reach out. We want to help. And with that, thank you so much for listening to the Healthy CEO Show. Gus, appreciate you, brother. It's good to have you back on, man. This was fun.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Jason. God bless you, and God bless everybody listening.
The content provided in this podcast, The Healthy CEO, is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Healthy CEO. Any information provided by our hosts or guests, including any physicians who may appear on the podcast, is solely for informational purposes and does not create any doctor-patient relationship. Listeners are advised to consult with their healthcare providers before making any changes to their health routines. The healthy CEO and its affiliates assume no responsibility or liability for any consequence resulting directly or indirectly from any action or inaction you take based on the information provided in this podcast.